Welcome back, everyone. The Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, founder of FalcFans.com. I'm joined by my co-host Scott Karasik, who covers the draft for ProFootballSpot.com. We are back this week after the Falcons bye week to preview their upcoming Week 10 matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, and we're going to try to, we don't have a whole lot to talk about this week, so we'll try to fill out the show a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Thomas Dimitroff. Scott and I got into a little Twitter argument early today, so we'll finish up that argument tonight. We'll talk a little bit about social media faux pas, I guess, one of the Falcons rookies had over the weekend during the bye week, 2 years in a row. But we'll touch briefly on that, and as usual, we will answer you guys' mailbag questions at the end of the show. So, Scott, let's talk a little bit more Falcons stuff before we get into that other stuff. So the Falcons are playing the Colts this week.
Yep.
Now, this is a sort of a big game for the Falcons just because they've been in a funk. We've talked about that. Anybody's watched the last couple of shows. So we talked about pretty much throughout every episode. So it's one of those things where this is is this a must-win situation for the Falcons? Do they need to beat the Colts to get their season back on track this week?
You don't want to lose 3 games in a row, no matter who it is. I would say it is a must-win situation. I think the Falcons are a better team than the Colts by far. And I think they should win. And one of those, if they don't win, it's what the hell is going on? Was Dan Quinn really the right coach for this team? And that's when you start questioning it. Like, hold on, there's something going on here. I think they'll turn it around. I think the bye week was exactly what they needed at exactly the right time. They get the Colts. They're at home. They're coming off a bye. They're playing a backup quarterback. They had a chance to look at the film and review and see all the different things and realize, you know what? Maybe we should flip our guys. Maybe we should put Vic Beasley on the left. Maybe we should put O'Brien Schofield on the right. Maybe we should put guys where they really win. Maybe we should put Grady Jarrett in on the base packages, instead of Rashid Hageman, and put Hageman out there with the blitz packages. Maybe we should put Babineau in on the base packages instead of Tyson Jackson because he can actually pass rush. So I think we'll see a big mix on the defensive line, at least just trying to get something going. I did notice that this past week when they not this past week, but during the bye week, when they completely just said, "Oh, hey, we're gonna put Vic Beasley on the right or on the left, and then put Schofield on the right," it worked out so much better. Beasley got 5 pressures, only rushing from that one side. Schofield wound up getting a hurry and a hit from the other side, and just overall, the pass rush looked better. Just so much better. So I think they're going to go in. They're going to look at that. That's going to be the pass rush there. I don't know if Vic Beasley ends up going against Anthony Costanzo. I think he ends up going against the right tackle, who is sorry, I have to look at their depth chart because I forgot off the top of my head. Joe Wrights.
Yeah. Who
is slow. So Beasley should be able to get around him pretty quickly, pretty easily. He needs to trust his speed rush. He should be okay. They need to work in some more pass rush ability into the base package. Because if they can do that, it'll be a lot more fun. And the Falcons would be a lot better. So just got to continue working it, continue making it, actually making it work, because it's going to be very tough.
Well, I do think this is a must-win game for the Falcons. It's hard for me to sort of see them, if they can't come out this week and play a good enough football game to beat the Colts, who are going to be without Andrew Luck. Probably the drop off from Andrew Luck to Matt Hasselbeck is probably the smallest drop-off from a good starting quarterback to the backup in the league. So it's not as if they're in terrible hands with Hasselbeck. But to me, what the Colts look like, watching some of those 2 starts that Hasselbeck had earlier in the year, they look like a pretty average team. There's really nothing special about the Colts. Like, you have T.Y. Hilton, you have a decent offense, but with Hasselbeck at the quarterback, they're not really going to push the ball downfield to a huge degree. If you get Hilton one-on-one on the outside, they'll take their shots. But I don't expect Hilton to do that much damage against Trufant. I guess I'd be a little concerned when he gets matched up against Jalen Collins or whatnot. But Hilton spends a lot of time in the slot, and he'll face Robert Alford, and I think this would be a good sort of litmus test to see how Alford sort of deals with a fast receiver. He didn't have a great game against Kendall Wright a couple of weeks ago when we played the Titans. So I think this will be a little bit of a redemption game for Robert Alford if he can, play T.Y. Hilton pretty well. And I think, given that the Falcons are pretty healthy this week, Alford's is supposed to play. He didn't practice earlier this week, but he's supposed to practice later this week. So that's looking positive for his return this week. Hankerson was limited earlier this week, but expectations, everything that's being said is that he'll play this weekend. William Moore and Justin Durant are back. So they should be at full health on both sides of the ball. Hopefully Julio is going to be a little bit more spry than he was against the 49ers, because now he has, 2 whole weeks to heal. So I feel like if the Falcons can't come out and put forth a good enough game to beat the Colts, then they're going to be in serious trouble for the remainder of the season, because the schedule is really only going to get harder. The Vikings are a better team than the Colts. The Panthers are certainly a better team than the Colts. And we've already lost to the Bucs and the Saints. And so, obviously those aren't going to be, easy wins, because they weren't before, because the Falcons lost. So it's one of those things where if the Falcons can't beat the Colts, then, it's not looking good for their playoff hopes. It's just hard for me to see them suddenly not being able to get it together this week and then being able to get it together some later time in the season. So I feel like this is a must-win game for the Falcons. It's kind of, even if they, do lose, it's hard for me to see them make the playoffs unless some other team just really, like the Colts or whoever is the second place team in the NFC West, just really just botches not the Colts, the Vikings, or the other second place team in the NFC West just really botches the second half of the season. So I feel like the Falcons really need to, they can't do it this week, then when will we expect them to do it? So
I agree. They really have to play a full, complete game this week. That's the big thing. If they can play a full, complete game, if Matt Ryan can get his head out of his ass and come back good from the bye, if the overall team needs to look better.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, my comments on the Colts, not to sort of belittle the Colts and say they suck or anything like that. It's just, I feel like Coby Fleener could do some things against our defense. He did it. He was very productive against the Jaguars defense, and they run a similar scheme, finding soft spots in those zones between and behind the linebackers. But I also feel that with our running game, when you look at the Colts, when Hasselbeck was under center, they relied heavily on sort of running the football with Frank Gore and whatnot to sort of get him into a rhythm, just because simply what I said earlier, they're not going to really be a team that's going to air it out. So it's like, our defense is pretty good at stopping the run, has been consistently that throughout the season. So it's like, I feel like we can stop their running game, and that should get us into favorable situations against the Colts. The thing I'm looking forward to seeing is, will Vontae Davis shadow Julio Jones? I know I haven't watched enough Colts football to know if the Colts are using Davis as a shadow corner, but I do know that they were at least talking about using him that way in the preseason, and I think, this is as good a week as any to do that. With Julio Jones, the corners historically that he's had the most trouble with are guys like Vontae Davis that are big, physical, long corners. We've seen Vontae Davis pretty much shut down Demaryius Thomas every time he's faced him the last couple of years. I don't expect that to happen with Julio, but if he's not playing better than what he got, I wouldn't say shut down, but he was very effectively contained by Dante Johnson and Marcus Cromartie against the 49ers, even though he did have like 10 catches. Vontae Davis is a lot better than those guys. So I'm curious to see how that matchup goes. And I also want to see Jarrell Freeman versus Devontae Freeman. It's the Freeman family reunion. So it's going to be Freeman on Freeman crime this week, I guess.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully Devontae wins that battle over Jarrell.
Yeah. I don't think Vontae is a slot corner. Or not slot corner. Shadow corner.
Yeah, I don't think they've done it this year, but I do know that they were talking about doing it in the preseason with some of the matchups, but I don't think they did it really that much. But then again, I'm not watching a ton of Colts games, so I can't say. I've only watched some of the parts of some of their games. Okay, Scott, you got anything else to say about this Colts matchup, or do you want to move on to some of these other exciting segments that we're going to do this week?
I'm good on those.
All right, folks. So this is our time where Scott and I are going to squash the beef on Thomas Dimitroff. Like, this has been – we might have already done this before, but we're just going to do it again because I don't think we're ever going to see eye to eye on this dude. So we're going to talk a little bit about sort of our opinions on Thomas Dimitroff. If you missed the Twitter exchange earlier, I went into one of my usual – weekly rants on Thomas Dimitroff. I don't even remember what we were arguing about.
You said he was going to get fired at the end of the year because Russ landing for it. And Russ has never been ready.
Let me clarify. I said it wouldn't shock me if he gets fired. I didn't say he would get fired. I said it wouldn't shock me if he gets fired because of a Russ landing report. Yes. I don't think he's running the team anymore. I think basically, like, what's prompted that was today the Falcons made an addition to the open cornerback spot in their practice squad once they promoted King, last week and cut Desmond Sauer, so they had a spot available. And what sort of prompted me thinking that is when you go back throughout the Mike Smith and Thomas Dimitroff era, pretty much unless there was an injury, I think with maybe one exception – is like a safety from Appalachian State that Mark LeCurry, I think, was like the only exception to this. Over like that 7-year period, the Falcons never changed their practice squad unless there was an injury. And so that was the only time they ever made an addition to the practice squad. So basically, under the previous regime, if you made the practice squad at the beginning of the season, chances were like 90% that you were going to make it on a practice squad at the end of the year. And that hasn't really been the case with the new regime. And that's sort of one of the signs that, to me, like Dimitroff's influence over the team's roster is pretty much non-existent, which we kind of knew because, the early reports at the beginning of the offseason were that Dan Quinn would have control over the roster and whatnot. So, but it's just
287 days ago, when Dan Quinn was hired by the Falcoholics and GM at the conference, Dimitroff has final authority on draft picks. Quinn has final authority on 53, 46, and practice squad.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is I feel like in Dan Quinn's mind, because Thomas Dimitroff's job is done in May, he doesn't have that. You can bring in anybody and sort of coordinate the draft. And I don't feel like Thomas Dimitroff's value, especially as a drafter, when you look at his history, is particularly good. And I think there's a decent chance, particularly, and this goes back to the tweet I made earlier today, if the Falcons can make the playoffs and make a deep playoff run, I think Dan Quinn will then have the clout within the organization to basically make a power move, a power play, and if he wanted to, he can push Thomas Dimitroff out. Whether he does or doesn't, I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me if he does.
I'd be very shocked if he did. Okay. Just because that doesn't seem like his personality.
Okay. I think Dan Quinn's public persona is probably different than what it actually is, but we'll see. I think a lot of things that Dan Quinn might say or want. No, the way I'm going to make it sound is like he's a sociopath, or I'm not saying that, but I think we perceive him a certain way, which I don't think is necessarily accurate, but who knows?
He seems like a very team-oriented guy, and he's been pretty. How do I put this? He's been pretty complimentary of been pretty complimentary of Dimitroff throughout his time with Atlanta. Like, yeah, this guy works really well with me. Basically, he's like, oh, hey, this is my puppet. Dimitroff can be my Pioli. After seeing what happened in New England and what they basically do in Seattle. It's the same kind of thought.
Well, I know you dismissed the report, but I do think it's interesting that Russ Landy's report came at the same time when the Falcons were making final roster moves. And I think, during the draft, Dan Quinn was
Russ
finally
Landy.
coming.
I mean, I've met the guy. Like, he's just, and I hate to like sound like I'm just talking shit about a dude, but he doesn't really have any legitimate standing when it comes to most front offices, from what I've seen. Like, he's the guy that they pass smoke screens to just to see who's going to leak something.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then why would someone pass him a smoke screen that Thomas Dimitroff's going to get fired at the end of the year?
That I don't know. But I also don't think he got that from someone within the team either. I think he got that from a couple agents. Because that's been a rumor that's been making rounds in agent circles for a while. That Pioli's going to make a power move, or Dimitroff's going to, not Dimitroff, Quinn's going to make a power move at the end of the year, and blah, blah, blah. It's been going on since before Quinn was hired.
Okay. I don't think Thomas Dimitroff is on the firm footing. And partially, a lot of that it has to do with I think he's been terrible at his job, but I'm apparently the crazy.
He's terrible at his job. Has he been the best GM in the NFL? No. But every single GM has misses. Every last one of them.
Not as many as he does.
Yeah, they do.
All right. I'll break it down for you, Scott. This is my Thomas Dimitroff argument in a nutshell, right? I want to get the numbers up so I don't screw this up. Okay. You go back to that 2010 season, right, where the Falcons lost in the playoffs to the Packers. Their defense got exposed. They had been building up their defense for a number of off seasons going into that year. And that was the best defense we had under Brian Van Gorder. And it was a pretty decent defense, and then we played the Packers, and the Packers absolutely decimated them because they got 0 stops. So you look at that season, and the big 2 takeaways from that game was the Falcons need to get more explosive, and they need to get better on defense. Obviously, their plans to get more explosive were exclusively tied into Julio Jones, and their plans to get better on defense was basically signing Ray Edwards. But you look at the next 4 off seasons after that 2010 season, you look at the inability of this team to improve their defense. A defense, again, that I will remind you, got 0 stops in a playoff game. You look at Ray Edwards, that's a miss. You look at Akeem Dent, that's a miss. The only other defensive player they drafted in 2011 was Cliff Matthews, that's a miss. You go to 2012, their big free agent signing was Lofa Tatupu, that's a miss. They traded for Asante Samuel, that's a hit, right? But then they didn't draft a defensive player in the draft until Jonathan Massagoy, that's another miss. So we're at 1 for 6 in 2 off seasons. Then you go to 2013, Trufont's a hit, Alfred's a hit, Goodman's a miss, right? Mapanga's probably a miss.
Did you really call Goodman a miss, though?
He didn't improve the defense. I'm not saying he's a terrible player, but he's not.
So can you call a guy who at least shows rotational depth in the 4th round a miss?
rotational depth does not make you does not going to help you against the Packers. That's what I'm saying.
He was better than your boy Tyson Jackson last year.
Another miss, right? O.C. Umenora was another miss. Right? You go to 2014. Rashid Hageman, I think Rashid Hageman's going to wind up being a hit, but he was a 3-year project when we drafted him. He certainly didn't help us.
I agree.
2014. Desmond Southworth's a miss. Prince Shimbo's a miss. Ricardo Allen's a miss. Paul Solak, Tyson Jackson, miss.
Wait, Ricardo Allen's a miss?
For last year, yeah, he was a miss because he spent the entire year on the practice squad because we drafted.
You could argue that this year he's been a hit.
But the point I'm trying to make is
draft isn't about 1 year.
No, I'm talking about one of the reasons why we constantly argued last year about talent versus scheme and why the defense was one of the worst defenses of all time was because of what I'm illustrating right now, where you go for 4 entire off seasons where you have 3 hits. If you want to say Dwight Lowry is a hit, that's a 4. If you want to say Josh Wilson is a hit, that's 5. You have 5 hits, all of them being Desmond Trufant, Robert Alford, Josh Wilson, Dwight Lowry, and Asante Samuel over 4 offseasons. All of them are secondary players. The Falcons, for 4 offseasons, did not add a single significant piece to their defense in 4 offseasons prior to the 2014 season. And that's one of the big reasons why this team did not have a good defense last year. And that's, to me, is what the general managership that Thomas Dimitroff brings to the table. I have 5 hits out of like 20 players addition. Like, people can sit there and say that every GM misses, but every GM doesn't miss 15 out of 20 times. Doesn't miss 75% of the time. If you miss 75% of the time as a GM, you would get fired in the NFL.
And a lot of them have gotten fired.
Except for Thomas Dimitroff.
But when you're saying, oh, this guy's a miss, this guy's a miss, some of these guys, we don't really know what they are yet. We don't really know what Stanley Mapanga is. He's still on the practice squad. We don't know what the plan is there under Dan Quinn.
Look, I'm a Stanley Mapanga fan, but I'm not going to sit here and act like he's anything more than a rotation backup.
And why is that a miss, is my question.
That's a miss because that's not a significant addition to your defense. You're not building a roster of situation
round pick.
Yeah, relative
round pick. You can't expect a 5th round pick to be an instant starter.
I don't expect
that you're going to get the Grady Jarrett types.
An instant starter. The point I'm trying to make is the Falcons for 4 years tried to build a defense out of 5th round picks. So even if you want to count Stanley Mapanga as a success story, when he's one of the 5 or 6 most successful players that you've taken in 4 off seasons, that's bad personnel decisions.
And you could argue that the undrafted free agents have been better than the draft picks at some spots, like linebacker.
3rd round pick has got outplayed in 2 years by an undrafted free agent.
Akeem Dent, yeah. Got outplayed by Warlow.
Same thing with Peter Kahns and Lamar Holmes. James Stone and Ryan Schrader both passed those guys up. 2nd and 3rd round picks.
And that was a draft. That 2012 draft was probably one of the worst drafts, not just for the Falcons, but for every team. Go back and look at the 2012 draft. Go look at the top of it. Yeah, you got Luck and Griffin. You got Luke Kuechly. But you got a lot of crap up there. You got Trent Richardson. You got Morris Claiborne. You got Mark Barron, who finally got moved to linebacker. You got Michael Floyd, who's okay. He's a solid number 2 receiver. Brockers and Irvin, who are solid. Irvin probably be a Falcon next year, too. Chandler Jones is good. But, there may be 10 starters in that first round.
Seattle,
10 starters throughout the rest of the draft. So, yeah, it sucks that they took Peter Kahns over Levante David in the 2nd round. I would have preferred Levante David. Hell, I would have rather them take Kelechi Osemele. because I liked Kelechi Osemele. I had him rated higher than Peter Collins that year. That would have made more sense. And in the second round, I didn't understand why they took Lamar Holmes, because Holmes is garbage.
Okay.
He was better than Sam Baker, but that's not saying much. I would rather have had them take Lamar Miller or Ben Jones.
Okay. This to me is always the classic response to any sort of argument made against Thomas Dimitroff. Oh, well, no one did a good job in that draft. So his sucking in that draft, him having the worst.
Go back and look at the 12 draft.
Seattle did fine in that draft. Miami did fine in that draft. New England did fine in that draft. There's plenty of teams that drafted well in that year. They didn't exactly, they're not going to carve out a wing in Canton for those teams for their draft classes. But Miami got Tannehill and Lamar Miller.
Picks in that draft.
2 more picks than the Falcons got.
And they were both in the first round.
All right, Miami got Olivier Vernon, Lamar Miller. That's a 3rd round pick. That's a 4th round pick. They got Ryan Tannehill. That's a 1st round pick.
That's one of the few teams that did well in that entire draft.
That's what being good at your job is. The cream rises to the top. Like, being in the middle or being at the bottom means that you're bad at your job. Like, the good teams that draft well. That means being in the top 10 percentile, being in the top or 90th percentile. Like, that's what being a good GM is. That's what being a good quarterback is. Like, you don't sit there and say, oh man, Ryan Mallett, he's such a good quarterback because he's one of the 32 starters in the NFL. No, he's a bad quarterback because he's at the bottom of the 32 starters in the NFL. That's what Thomas Dimitroff is. He's the Ryan Mallett of GMs.
Wow. I think you should go look at what Indianapolis has been doing. You should go look at what Jacksonville's been doing. You should go look at what Houston's been doing. You should go see what Tampa Bay did under Mark Dominic, since that's the guy who you're touting.
I'm not touting Mark Dominic. I'm just pointing out that that's the guy that Dan Quinn had handpicked to be his GM if he got the Jets job.
Yeah, because that's a guy who's available.
Yeah. And he's still available.
He's already fired. I think Dan Quinn is the kind of guy who's going to be like, oh, you know what? I like Dimitroff because I can basically tell him this is what I want in a player. He'll go out and find me the players that fit what I want, and then I'll pick what I want.
And he probably could do the same thing with Mark Dominic. But the only thing that's keeping him from firing Thomas Dimitroff and hiring Mark Dominic is Arthur Blank. Because Arthur Blank doesn't want to give him all the power in the organization, which is understandable given how the Philadelphia Eagles have blown up in recent years doing that exact same thing. So Thomas Dimitroff is going to keep his job because of the owner, not because he's good at his job. Again, 75% miss rate on defensive additions. That's why you have a terrible defense last year.
And they've done way better this year because they've basically hit on everything this year.
Pretty much. Surprisingly.
What also happened after that 2010 loss? Mike Smith lost his vision of what he wanted the team to be. There was no coherent mold of what a Falcon was.
You want to know why that was?
3 years, when you were building those 3 years, you had what a Falcon was supposed to be. And then after that, there was no coherent vision between Mike Smith and Thomas Dimitroff. And then it showed in the results of the picks. There's a coherent vision now between Quinn and Dimitroff. What the hell do I want? This is what I want. All right, I'll go get this. Since this is what you want, this is what we'll get.
But you want to know why the Falcons lost that vision? It's because Thomas Dimitroff decided he wanted to trade up for Julio Jones. And Mike Smith.
Who wanted a lot more explosion in the offense? Mike Smith. Because he felt that's what the missing element was. And who was the most explosive player in the draft that year? Julio Jones.
You go back and you read The War Room by Michael Hawley. Thomas Dimitroff readily admits that he was the onus behind that Julio Jones trade. Now, I'm not saying it was a bad trade, but I'm saying that's what lost the identity of this team because Mike Smith and Mike Mularkey and all those guys had no clue how to deal with Julio Jones, how to incorporate a more explosive offense. Thomas Dimitroff inserted himself into the identity of this team, and the team lost their identity. But no one wants to say that because then it would, suggest that Thomas Dimitroff is not good at his job. But hey, what do I know?
All I know is at this point, they're basically using him as a glorified scouting head and a contract guy, which is what Pioli was in New England. And that's his strength. He shouldn't be directly making every single pick without Quinn's input of, this is my guy. But no GM should not work with his head coach. Like, every GM should be like, hey, like in Carolina, the reason why Gettleman's been getting good picks, hey, Ron, what should we get for you? Like, what do you feel the team needs are? What kind of player do you want? Oh, you want a fast linebacker who could eventually learn from Thomas Davis? All right, we'll get you one. Oh, crap. No one else is really good on our board but Shaq Thompson. All right, we'll take Shaq Thompson.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
That's how nothing wrong with
it work. It didn't work that way in Atlanta because Dimitroff was, again, it worked. The GM and head coach need to have equal power, right? After 2010, our GM obviously had way more power and wasn't listening to Smith because he was a fucking idiot. Not Dimitroff, but Smith. Smith is a fucking idiot.
Well, he started listening to Smith in 2014 and
listen to him again, and then it didn't work because he wound up spending a lot of money on two guys that weren't worth it.
Yeah, and if you watch football, you should know better than spend. No offense to Tyson Jackson and Paul Soliai, but it doesn't. To me, it's an unforgivable sin to pay those guys $57 million if you actually watch them play. But I'm sure that Thomas Dimitroff was sitting in his office and Scott Pioli ran in there and said, "Hey, Thomas, I got this guy, Tyson Jackson. He was a bust in Kansas City, but I'm insisting that he's going to be a great player for us. You want to sign him?" Like, okay, Thomas Dimitroff's like, okay, here's $25 million we can piss away on Tyson Jackson. And then Mike Nolan comes into his office and says, hey, this guy Paul Soliai that I worked with 4 years ago, that was good 4 years ago, but if you actually watch his tape from the last 3 seasons, was not very good in Miami. Let's go out and get him. And then Thomas Dimitroff, okay. And then he was like, let's give him $33 million and guarantee him $14 million. He doesn't watch. He's not good at evaluating talent. That's ultimately the problem. Because to me, I can sit there. You can go back and you can watch this show from after we signed those moves, and I sat there and told people these aren't moves that are going to help this team get better. All you have to do is watch tape, and you know that. But the Falcons insisted we're beefing up, we're getting tough up front, and we're going to be tough and physical and blah blah blah, and it's a whole bunch of BS because they're not good at evaluating talent. But that's changed now with Dan Quinn. So
yeah, because Quinn took those pieces that weren't working and made them work. It's amazing what a coach can do.
Okay. Yeah.
I think you'd agree with me that the Paul Soliai move looks like a hit now because Soliai is being an impact in the middle of the defense. When Soliai's in there, does he not make plays against the run?
Soliai's fine when you play him 40% of the time and you only pay him a finite amount of money. I mean, there's no amount of production that he's going to make that's going to make that contract worth it. I mean, if Dan Quinn was running the shots like he did this offseason, he wouldn't have paid him that much money. He would have given him at least probably less than half that type of money. That's the difference.
Linval Joseph. The guy that I was wanting them to sign forever.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
And he's pretty damn good. And he's only 27. And he's in his 6th year as a pro.
Yeah, we're going to get to see him up close and personal in next week. So looking forward to that.
For James Stone or Mike Person or Gino Gradkowski, whoever's going to get their shit rocked by him.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game. Fun stuff. Vikings.
So, all right. Let's move on to this Tevin Coleman
nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, there's worse things that could have happened during a bye week, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. So if you guys hadn't heard, Tevin Coleman, there's basically, I guess, a website. This was on MediaTakeout.com. There's a website that is catfishing athletes specifically. It's basically some hot chick saying, "Send me some dick pics," for lack of a better term. And then as soon as the player sends them, they leak them on the internet. And this happened to Tevin Coleman during the bye week. You can Google it if you want to see naked pictures of Tevin Coleman. If that's your bag. So, I mean, this is 2 years in a row where the Falcons have had a rookie. Last year was Rashid Hageman trying to buy weed on Instagram, where, social media hasn't helped out the Falcons rookie draft class 2 years. This is not a big deal, but, it's just another example of, maybe the Falcons social media team can, be a little bit more stringent with those guys in next year's draft class. Try to tell them a couple of these things, may not be good stuff for you. I don't know. You got anything to say, Scott?
Who hasn't sent a dick pic?
I actually haven't sent a dick pic to anybody.
All I'm going to say is NFL players, there's this wonderful app called Snapchat. And if you're going to send a dick pic, you send it through Snapchat. Because, one, you'll get told, oh, hey, this person copied your picture, if they do take a snapshot of it. And two, it only lasts for like 5 seconds. And then it gets deleted. Snapchat, it's your friend.
All right. Any Falcon players watching or listening, Scott gave you your advice on sending dick pics. So,
And I only send them to my girlfriend. So, yeah.
Yeah, not a big fan of
I'm not either, honestly. She asked for them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got that out of the way.
Mailbag. All right.
All right, folks. All right. Our weekly dick pic segment. First mailbag question from Vienna Falcons. Opinion on Matt Ryan looking for Justin Hardy on that 3rd and goal play before Quinn's snafu. Is that a sign of chemistry development, or is that an indictment of the Falcons' secondary weapons?
That was just a bad call because there were 5 guys in the box. Ryan should have seen, oh crap, there's 5 guys in the box. Whispered something to Devontae Freeman and just handed Freeman the ball. That's what should have happened. If we're being honest. I mean, yeah, you could say it's chemistry development that he's searching for Justin Hardy instead of, Eric Weems or Roddy White or Nick Williams on that side of the field. But he should have changed the play.
Yeah, that play was really a designed play for Justin Hardy. And kudos to Jimmy Ward. He read it beautifully, made the tackle, sort of blew up that play. I think, I'm not going to sit here and say that's really a sign of either one of those things. I think, Kyle Shanahan has made an indictment of the Falcons' secondary weapons throughout the season. So that play, that's just one of maybe 50 examples. It's clear in Kyle Shanahan's mind, at least by his play calling, that he doesn't believe in any wide receiver not named Julio Jones or Leonard Hankerson. So, but, I guess, yeah. Sure, we can chalk it up as small chemistry development, I guess. All right, next question comes from Devontae Hughes at Cookie by Nature. He asks, how much of an impact will the change in the nickel package be?
Well, if it mirrors this past weekend, or not this past weekend, but before the bye, it should be pretty good. the Falcons got more pressure. So if the goal is, hey, let's get more pressure, then I think it's positive.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll find out. I mean, they got to get more pressure. That's really the one thing missing from the defense. Obviously, there are other flaws that they have on that side of the ball, but those flaws are just, linebacker coverage, safety coverage, that's just going to be there. So the way to mask that is to get more pressure. And, I don't know if shuffling guys is going to make that much of a difference. I think it just really boils down to the one guy that you can look at and say, this guy could be a really good pass rusher, starts to look like a really good pass rusher, and that's Vic Beasley. I've been saying that for over a month now. So until he starts to really be that difference maker up front, or until the Falcons start to acquire some more pass rushers, which won't happen until the offseason, I'm not going to expect huge things out of their pass rush. But I'm crossing my fingers. He's got a bunch of relatively easy matchups coming up. Costanzo's not a slouch or anything, but he's not exactly elite. As Scott mentioned, if he plays more on the left, Joe Wrights is not going to be a huge hassle for him. Next week he's at Khalil and Clemmings. Regardless of where he lines up, he should be able to win those matchups. He's at the Bucs again. He'll see them a second time. Carolina, their tackles have played a lot better than I think almost anybody expected them. So that's not an easy move. But, Michael Orr isn't exactly, a who's who of left tackle. And I'm trying to figure out who the right tackle is there. Let me look it up real quick. Oh, Remmers is fine. But, yeah, I mean, it's just like Vic Beasley has some matchups. So if he can step up his game, he should be able to exploit those matchups in the next coming games, and he should start to hit his stride. If he doesn't, it is what it is. He's a rookie. It happens. But we'll see.
All right.
Next, we got Evan Birchfield. He says, which Colts team do you think will face on Sunday? The good Colts or the bad Colts?
I hope to God we play the bad Colts. I mean, I can't be happy about playing a good Colts team, because a good Colts team means that they actually might beat the Falcons, and that's a not good situation.
I expect the Colts to come out and play a pretty good football game. I just hope the Falcons come out and play a better football game. So I would like, honestly, if I'm being honest, I would like to see a good Colts team come out and the Falcons beat that team. That would give me a lot more confidence going into this home stretch of the season. But if they just have to sort of get a win against a bad Colts team, that'll work in my book as well.
I mean, if the bad Colts team comes out and the Falcons win 56-0, I mean, can we really be mad at that either?
No, not it is what it is. At the end of the day, the Falcons need a win. They really need a win.
Yep.
And it will make me feel better if they play well and get that win. But at this point in time, I just kind of need a win, and hopefully we can get the better play as the season wears on. But they just need something to build their confidence a little bit.
Win games, worry about the rest later kind of situation.
Yeah. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, any matchups you're looking forward to seeing against the Colts?
Hopefully Vic Beasley versus Joe Wrights, because I feel like that could be a 3-sack matchup.
Yeah, mine's Jarrell versus Devontae Freeman. I'm looking forward to that one. Number 50 and number 24, right? Is that Devontae's number?
Yeah.
Okay, I was about to say. I felt very embarrassed if I didn't remember Devontae's number.
Cousin.
I know. My mind blanked for a second. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that matchup. Other than that, I hope we can stop Coby Fleener. I really hope to not see Coby Fleener have like a 10-catch game.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that, I guess. Him not catching 10 passes.
Yeah, that'd be good, but will it happen?
I wouldn't back. I would if you got Kobe Fleener on your fantasy team. I think this week might be a good week to start him. That's what I'll say.
It might also be a really good week to start Matt Ryan, though, because for whatever reason, he does seem to do well after the bye.
That's true. All right, next question. We got a couple from Dustin at Dirty Birds. His first one is, could you see Kamal Ishmael move to linebacker because of his run-stuffing ability now that Akeem King is on the 53-man roster?
If they play Akeem King at, an actual defensive spot, then sure, but I don't know if they will. I think Akeem King long-term is a 100% pure, just special teams guy. I think that's his long-term role.
Okay. All right. Yeah, look, I don't put a whole lot of stock in this moving safeties and linebacker in this scheme. I don't think it works. I know our safety, our strong safety, plays in the box, so he's functioning similar to a linebacker, but playing weak side linebacker or Mike linebacker is basically the same spot in the scheme. Like the differences between the two is like one guy covers the flat and one guy covers the hash over the middle of the field. One guy handles the B gap and the other guy handles the A gap, but the skill set is pretty much the exact same. So unless you think a safety can play middle linebacker for this team, then he really isn't a great fit for weak side linebacker, and vice versa. So I don't really see Kamal Ishmael moving to linebacker as a good move. Obviously, he's not exactly doing great things at safety. He's doing okay as long as he's not having to cover the deep half or man-on-man coverage, which thankfully this scheme doesn't ask him to do a ton. But yeah, I think Akeem King is the same role as Scott said. The same role that I thought Southwood was destined for after last year. Special teams guy. They're the same player, basically. Maybe King will develop in the future. Athletically speaking, they're not that far apart. But
they really aren't, which is weird.
King's future is really as a fourth corner. I would never imagine him being a nickel guy. So, basically the role that Phillip Adams has now, that's probably what you're hoping Akeem King develops into. Mm-hmm. That sort of player. All right. Next one is from Dustin. He asks, now that half the regular season is officially gone, what's your prediction on the Falcons record?
11-5, 10-6. I think they get it together. I might be the only one who thinks they get it together, but I think they get it together. I think they make some noise when it finally gets to playoff time.
I think we'll find out whether that prediction, I think we'll see this weekend. I had them going into the season at like 9-7, 10-6. So I feel like 9-7 is probably closer if they don't play better than they have. But I'm hoping that after this weekend, I can lean closer to 10-6. But yeah, if they lose this week, then I would probably say 8-8. Really, I just can't see them beating if they lose to the Colts, I can't see them beating the Vikings. I can't see them beating the Panthers. So that's 4 losses right there. So basically that means they have to sweep the Bucks, Saints, and Jaguars, which is possible, but considering they already lost to 2 of those teams, I don't see that happening. So 8-8 if they lose this weekend. But fingers crossed. All right, guys. Next one is from Dustin. What are some of the changes we as fans can expect from the Falcons during the second half of the season?
I don't know. I think they're going to try and run the ball more. That just seems like a common sense thing, though. The strength of your team is running the ball, so run the ball more. Other than that, I don't really know. I hope a lot of things look the same. Like the run defense. I hope that looks the same because they're a top 5 run defense right now. I hope they get better in the red zone with it, but I hope it basically looks the same and that they're just getting a lot of production out of it. Outside of the run defense, I mean, I want to see the running game look pretty much the same too, because they've been doing pretty well there. I don't know. I hope they get better at pass rushing. I hope they average 4 sacks a game from here to the end of the season. I hope as a team they start just destroying people up front with the pass rush, because I feel like a good pass rush would really help with the overall defense and make it go from that good level to that potential top 10 defense, because it could be a potential top 10 defense. So ideally they get some pass rush. Ideally Matt Ryan learns how to incorporate Tammy and Hankerson and Hardy and basically says, you know what, Roddy White, you're open every now and again, so we'll figure it out. But I just hope they somehow figure out how to get this passing offense to be a lot more reliable than it is. I hope the run offense emulates what it did during that 6-game stretch where Devontae Freeman was averaging over 100 yards a game, and then go from there.
Yeah, the changes I'm hoping to see, I hope that our offense can get more explosive. I hope our pass rush can be a little bit more formidable and, you know, a little bit put some fear into opposing offenses. Do I expect those things to happen? Sure. But, you know, I've expected those things to happen for the last couple of weeks, and it hasn't happened quite yet. So I guess I can, you know, hope springs eternal. But, yeah, those are like, I don't think we're going to see a dramatic difference in scheme. I don't think that's really Dan Quinn's cup of tea, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe Kyle Shanahan will get more comfortable with some guys than he has been, like Roddy White, like Justin Hardy. Maybe we'll see some new wrinkles where Hester's, you know, thrown out there for some screens and reverses when he gets back. You know, Tevin Coleman getting some more reps. I don't know. But maybe Levine Toilolo actually getting a red zone snap. Who knows? So I'm hoping all those things happen, but we'll see. All right. Another one from Dustin is, does Hardy stay on the active roster when Hankerson and Hester come back?
I don't see why not, because the guy you're taking off the active roster is Nick Williams. And I think it's safe to say that Hardy gives you exactly what Nick Williams already gives you. So I think the bigger question is, who out of Nick Williams and Eric Weems stays on the active roster?
Okay. I don't know. I really think it depends on what Hardy does over these next couple of weeks before Hester comes back. Like, I don't, when Hankerson is back, presuming Hankerson's back this week, I don't expect Hardy to be over him on the depth chart. So, I mean, we know Hester's going to be active. Well, we hope Hester's going to be active as a return specialist. You know, I don't know if Eric Williams is going to be deactivated because he has such a valuable role in special teams coverage. Now, Hardy has done some good things in special teams coverage the last couple of weeks, so it's not as if, you know, Williams is an essential piece there. But, you know, I'm curious. Honestly, I don't have an answer. Like, I think it's possible since we usually activate 5 wide receivers. So It's certainly possible, but I don't know. It really just, you know, if Hardy has a big game this week or next week, then I think the answer, it leans towards yes. If not, you know, if he's pretty quiet the next 2 weeks, then it wouldn't shock me if he goes back to being inactive for the rest of the year. But we'll see. Okay, last one from Dustin. With the players Atlanta has, what would your ideal front seven be to get more sacks on opposing quarterbacks in the second half of the season?
Well, because I think Malachi Goodman's a better pass rusher than Corey Bierman, and because I think he's a better pass rusher than Tyson Jackson, because I think he could do against the run at least what Tyson Jackson does in setting the edge. I'd have a base package of Goodman, Soliai, Hageman, And then at the Leo spot, I'd have Adrian Claiborne. Then for the actual nickel package, I'd have Schofield at right end, Claiborne, and then either Grady Jarrett or Jonathan Babineau. Just rotate those guys, keep them fresh. And then Vic Beasley at left end. At linebacker in the base, I'd actually have Vic Beasley at the strong side linebacker instead of Schofield or Reed, and just let him learn how to play that position, because I think that's where he plays long term. And then drop him down to end in nickel packages. Warlow at middle linebacker. Aaron hates to hear this, but I still think Warlow's the best middle linebacker we have on the roster. And then Durant at the weak side linebacker spot. Or flip them if you really want to get technical with it and put Warlow weak side and Durant at middle. But I think either way, you're looking at those two guys as the linebackers. Unless one of them gets hurt, then you throw Wheeler in.
Okay. To be honest with you, I wouldn't change anything. I think, in terms of ideal front seven, I think the differences between certain players is so small that it's not even worth changing it, to be honest with you. So my ideal front seven is probably the same at front seven. Like, I think you could probably put Wheeler at linebacker instead of Warlow, move Durant to middle and put Wheeler on the weak side. But I don't think as of right now, as of today, I don't feel like you're going to get dramatically better results. You could shuffle the base package, but I don't feel like any of those guys are really going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, regardless of who unless you put, I guess, Babineau in there. But, yeah, I don't know. Just in the four guys that rush the quarterback in the nickel sub package are probably the four best pass rushers, so I wouldn't change that up. So I probably mix Jared in probably a little bit more, maybe Babineau a little bit more in the base package. That would probably be my ideal. And that would be about it. If you could clone Nate Stupar 7 times, then maybe you would put him at all 7 spots. But other than that, then no, not much changes. All right. We have one from E-Man Scott 19. If you had to pick one lock that you could see coming to the Falcons in free agency this offseason, who's your guess? Who would you like to see?
The answer to both of those, I think, is the same guy, and it's Bruce Irvin. Because the biggest issue with the Falcons right now is pass rush, and he would give them someone across from Vic Beasley to be a good pass rusher. Basically, look at the snaps that you're giving to – the way I look at it is you're replacing snaps within the defense. Brooks Reed's played 190 snaps. Corey Beeman's played 285 snaps. If you took those guys out and instead played Bruce Irvin for 350 of those snaps and ran Vic Beasley up to cover the other snaps and ramped up O'Brien Schofield to cover the rest of those snaps, like between the three of them, those three guys are covering those snaps, I think you'd be much better off.
Okay. All right. I don't think Irvin's going to be a Falcon, but if I had to pick a lock, that's tough. I feel like I should pick a Seahawk if I'm picking a lock. But if I'm not picking Irvin, then I guess I got to go with Brandon Mebane.
Why?
Because you can save money by cutting Paul Soliai and replacing him with Brandon Mebane.
Or you could save money and take the guy who's basically Brandon Mebane in training and Grady Jarrett and put him in there instead.
I think Grady Jarrett's a couple of years away from being Brandon Mebane.
I don't think Brandon Mebane's played well at all this year. That's the other thing. I think he's past his prime.
That's fair. I wouldn't disagree with you. But I think if you can get him for a cheap deal, like 2 years, $5 million versus paying Paul Solo at $6 million, I think is worth it for you.
I mean, they've been playing Jordan Hill over him the past couple of weeks, and the defense has been better there.
Okay. Like I said, it's hard for me to pick a lock. Who would I like to see? I guess I'll go with Alex Mack if he opts out of his contract. Yeah, I guess that's who I'd like to see.
And that one makes a lot of sense because Mack loved playing under Shanahan last year. He did really well in the zone scheme last year under Shanahan.
Yeah, before he got hurt.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't control injury.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, yeah, before he got hurt. Yeah, he was pretty good.
He was pretty good, and he's been just as quick this year. I mean, Alex Mack is the new Matt Burke, basically. Just same kind of guy. Quick off the ball, brilliant with his line calls, huge. Like, he's everything you want in a center, and he doesn't screw up snapping, by the way. So, I mean, I like the fit. Okay. I love Alex Mack here. I think that line of Matthews, Levitre, Mack, whoever they bring in for right guard, or if Asamoah gets healthy enough, I think Asamoah could play right guard, and then Schrader. I think that'd be fun. Or if Jake Long gets healthy and can play right guard, that'd be fun too.
Okay. All right. Last question from Bruce Luong. He asks, what are the possibilities do y'all think Dan Quinn would release Soliai and Jackson for Bruce Irvin? Or who else should be released to make that happen?
Brooks Reed could be released like that for Bruce Irvin based on his contract. The other two guys that could I think he would just cut Tyson Jackson because Tyson Jackson's a horrible pass rusher. So, I mean, there you go. There's your two guys.
Well, looking at the numbers, I think there's a 0% chance that Brooks Reed gets cut. His contract is guaranteed for injury already. So, and as the Falcons showed with Tyson Jackson this past offseason, once a guy's contract is guaranteed, they're not going to cut him, even if you can find a better option, which we debated back and forth with Malachi Goodman and whatnot being upgrades over Tyson Jackson. So I think the Falcons are pretty much on the hook for Brooks Reed. I don't think you necessarily need to go out and pay Bruce Irvin. So I don't think Bruce Irvin's going to be a Falcon. I said that in May. I still believe that. So I don't think that's a big deal. So I guess, yeah, you would have to cut Brooks. If you want to see that happen, you have to cut Brooks Reed because you're not going to have Brooks Reed and Bruce Irvin on the team. If you want to maximize both of their skill sets. And yeah, I guess that would have to happen, but it's not going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. The Falcons thought Brooks Reed was worth $20 million 6 months ago, or yes, 8 months ago. I don't think anything's happened in the last, 8 months that would have changed that opinion. I know Brooks Reed hasn't been as productive as people were hoping that he would be, but that's just kind of the nature. You look at Bruce Irvin's numbers in Seattle versus Brooks Reed's numbers, and other than the pass rushing, they're about the same. I think Bruce Reed's on pace for 30 tackles this year. Bruce Irvin maxed out, I think, at 40 tackles, playing the same spot. He's just a better pass rusher. And I think the Falcons are going to try to upgrade their pass rush in other ways rather than going after Bruce Irvin. But, I know people like to draw that because he's an ex-Seahawk. He's an Atlanta native. He's already talked about wanting to be a Falcon. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll see.
I mean, the only other thing that I could almost say would be a lock is if Brian Cox Jr. comes out. because he was heavily recruited by Dan Quinn when Quinn was at Florida, and he perfectly fits that Michael Bennett role. That's the only other thing that I can think of that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, his dad is the Falcons defensive line coach. But athletically, Brian Cox Jr. is basically Michael Bennett. The way he's used at Florida right now is Michael Bennett. And I think he could step into that role here and do just fine. And learn the role and basically play where Tyson Jackson's playing now in the base package, and then work his way into that full-on role where he's doing exactly what Bennett does for the Seahawks. And he's probably a second round or either a late first, early second, or potentially a guy who could slip depending on his combine.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see which some of these pass rushers that make it to the market next year. You have guys like Olivier Vernon, Mike Daniels, Muhammad Wilkerson, who I'm 99% confident will get tagged. And I think there's a couple of big name veterans. I mentioned them on Twitter last week. You could see some guys get cut. The Bills are in some tight cap situation. They might wind up cutting either Mario Williams or Kyle Williams. I've heard those rumors. Packers might cut Julius Peppers. The Rams probably are going to cut Chris Long. So it'll be interesting. I think the Falcons will have options to explore as far as upgrading their pass rushing free agency next year. It'll just be, how many guys are available, and that's going to drive the market and whatnot. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I'm not too worried about Bruce Irvin. Like I feel like he's going to be one of like 8 guys that we can sign, and yeah, it's not a big deal to me, but we'll see.
Man, if Muhammad Wilkerson's available or if Mario Williams is available, you've got to bring them in. They're excellent against the run. They're ridiculously good as pass rushers, and that would completely change the defense. Like, I would pay Muhammad Wilkerson whatever the hell he wanted because he would completely change that defense.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like pretty much everybody on our front seven, particularly on our defensive line, we could find, if the right guys hit the market, we could find guys that could replace them. Like, I feel like Robert Ayers is a poor man's Michael Bennett. He could play Adrian Claiborne's role. I feel like Malik Jackson could do that and play Tyson Jackson's role. I feel like
Malik Jackson's really good.
I feel like Meebane can play Soliai's role. Mike Daniels is basically what Babineau was a couple of years ago. I doubt the Packers let him go, but, you never know. I feel like there'll be options for the Falcons next offseason. If they really wanted to revamp their front four, they could do it.
If Babineau had a big fatty next to him, like 3-4 years ago, he could have been a 10-sack guy with how he was playing. If they just had like a Grady Jarrett type, or not Grady Jarrett, a Paul Soliai type, back then it would have been so much nicer.
Yeah, and Vinny Curry's a free agent next year too. He'd be a great. I feel like he'd be better than Claiborne as well, or Tyson Jackson. So a lot of options.
Yeah,
a lot of options. One of them won't be Greg Hardy, I'll tell you that much. But other than that, a lot of options.
Yeah, but the Falcons not bringing in Greg Hardy is probably one of the few things that most fans at this point will agree with.
Yeah, it's odd,
Outside of like your 3 or 4 guys who somehow think domestic violence isn't a bad thing.
They just had it coming.
I don't even know what to tell you.
That was a joke, folks. Please don't think I was being serious. All right, guys, that's our show this week. Yeah, we will be back next week to talk about the Falcons' win over the Indianapolis Colts. If you want to get a mailbag question in on the show, use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. Tweet at me at FalFans. Scott is at Karasik PFS. You can also hit up the show's Twitter at Falcons PFC. I know the last couple of episodes haven't been on iTunes. I apologize for that. That should be fixed this week. So not to fret anybody that's listening right now. If you're listening to us right now, then it probably is on iTunes. So that's a good thing. So we'll be back next week, and enjoy your time. I hope you guys had a fun bye week, I guess. I don't know. I have to awkwardly end these shows every 18 weeks. So that's what I'm doing.